Always a great start to the day to begin recording, and we're going to talk about a topic that Jeff and I are very passionate about, which is again personalization and creating better experiences for our consumers, citizens, users, etc. So as way of introductions, my name's bencoit. I'm a vice president of business development at Phase 2, and I'm joined here by my colleague Jeff.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jeff Walpole. I'm the CEO and founder at Phase 2, or co-founder at Phase 2.
Great. So, like I said, we're going to move quick, and we'll have time at the end for questions and discussion. So before we jump right into the content, just want to establish the four things that we're here to talk about. And the first one is we need to understand why personalization is so important for the citizens.
Yeah, also, we want to help you guys determine the right level of personalization. We realize that personalization is sort of a big grab bag of things, and we're going to talk through what those are. You can do anything from, spend years and millions of dollars doing personalization, or you can start out with something small or anything in between. So our goal is to help you kind of understand those differences and what they might look like.
Third, we're gonna show you a framework that we've developed to help guide the journey through personalization, and we use the word journey very, very deliberately because it is not something that you just kind of do, you set it and forget it and then come back to it. It is something that you will constantly be working on and thinking on as you start that process.
Yeah, and then finally, we want to help you sell it in your organizations, right? Ben and I are probably better at selling than we are at doing, right? Arguably.
Probably.
So our job is to help you sell so you can sell it into your organizations.
All right, so let's jump into it.
A couple things about personalization. I think, there's a lot of probably definitions out there you could look up, and I think we've got a couple different slides to sort of talk through it. It's not the specific words you should be paying attention to, but the concepts. And so one of the most important concepts in personalization is this idea of getting from a send a message out, publishing type model that we're all familiar with in the content management world, getting that down from a large audience that hears the same thing or sees the same thing or is given the same actions to do, and bring it down to something that feels more like a one-to-one interaction, and using technology to do that. Most importantly, though, that's a bilateral relationship. It's value-based and it's voluntary. So I would encourage you, when thinking about personalization, especially in the sort of public sector context, not to think about like advertising, right? People kind of go straight to like, you're trying to sell me something. Really what we're looking for is something that's going to enrich the experience in a bi-directional way. And to do that, that's really about a relationship, right? So first and foremost, it's about a relationship. So right now, people have a very fleeting relationship, let's say specifically with US government websites, right? You go there when you need something. It's a one-time thing. It's a hold your nose and get it done, download the form type experience. This is about creating a relationship that's on an ongoing basis. And that happens with a lot of brands today. Great examples are out there in the commercial sector. We're trying to find what's applicable here in the public sector.
And as Jeff mentioned, this is truly, and you break it down to its most simplest terms, it's about one organization having one direct relationship with an end user, not a large, not many users that get a similar message, but a directed message from your organizations to a single individual. And from the purposes that we're talking about personalization here today, certainly at a technology-oriented conference, this is delivered by technology. That one-to-one message from your organization to an individual is delivered by a system, artificial intelligence. That's how we define, again, personalization. One-to-one delivered by a system or artificial intelligence. And the way that message is delivered, some of the channels by which that can happen are ones that are very familiar with all of us today. You've got websites, you've email, landing pages, even offline channels. Again, you can have personalized experiences through the mail, through call centers, through chatbots, which is again something that is becoming more commonplace, certainly outside of the government context, but something that we've probably all have experienced if we've had an inquiry to a large commercial brand. And then, as Jeff mentioned, advertisements, which is again where a lot of people jump directly to, kind of thinking of the use case of like the pair of shoes following you around on the internet. The advertisements, which again is really not what we're going to talk about here today.
And it doesn't go away once you bought them, right?
Yeah.
That's the worst part. So our idea for this talk kind of started when we were kicking around sort of a very provocative question, which is why we're not seeing more personalization developing in the public sector with our public sector clients. So as a frame of reference, we're probably about 80-20, maybe 75-25 commercial to government. So we see this as an opportunity to take what we're learning and what we're experiencing in the commercial sectors, particularly in consumer and in financial services, and bring that here to government. So the provocative question is sort of why are we not seeing that? So first and foremost, we know, and people at this conference are evidence, that there's a number of people out there that are passionate about providing better citizen experience, right, to government websites and all kinds of public sector entities. We know for a fact, and we'll talk about it a little bit in a minute, that delivering personalized experience is a better way to create that customer experience. So it kind of begs the question, well, why isn't it happening? And I think all of you have some very specific, well, I gotcha, because it's regulation or whatever, and we'll talk about that too. So what are the benefits to doing this? So I think, for a lot of people, it's also about establishing first and foremost, why would I want to do this, right? And again, this is part of the sell, right? Internally is, first of all, yeah, it does improve citizen experience, right? So we'll talk about that in a little more detail with some statistics that will help you maybe share that internally. But another thing that's really interesting is it really does help citizens find the most pertinent and appropriate content faster. One of the biggest complaints that people have using government websites is their inability to find the content they're looking for in an efficient, timely manner, right? So personalization can actually take that use case, and we'll talk about that. But another really interesting thing that personalization does is it surfaces relevant content that are for unmet or unexplored needs that citizens don't even know they have. They didn't know that a particular department or agency was responsible for something or could provide something for them. So it actually surfaces things that are discovery oriented that the individual didn't know they're interested in or need, right? There are, especially in the commercial case, there are a lot of conversions that we're looking to optimize, right? So you want someone to go buy someone, to donate, to volunteer, to provide their information, to join a cause, to sign a petition, to do whatever. Even the government has commercial cases, right? Buying stamps, postal service or whatever, right? There's those things, but there's also other types of conversions, and Ben's going to talk a little bit about what those are and how we characterize them. And then obviously lowering customer support costs from non-web channels, right? So if we can deliver you the information that you need in a relevant way through a personalized experience on the web, you're less likely to do a call center or take people's time in person at a facility or use mail or other less efficient means of communication.
And we say all this, we've referenced the work that we've done or we've all experienced in the commercial space. And we may sit here thinking like, well, we're never going to get there from the public sector perspective, and commercial's so far ahead of us. And what we've seen is that even on the other side of the world, on the commercial side, non-government side of the world, they're struggling too. So you'll see here, 81% of customer brands feel they have a holistic view of their customers and they're doing a great job. Yet, only 37% of their customers actually feel that they're doing a good job. So there's this gap, right? And it's not just one, again, that is seen by us here serving citizens and working in a government space. It's seen even by those that are at the very far bleeding edge of doing this in the commercial world as well. And that's okay. And we'll see here in the next couple of slides that there's tremendous opportunity from where we are, and even making small improvements can have tremendous impact.
Yeah, so there's also a lot of public sector information, obviously. Accenture did a study actually quite a few years ago, admittedly, called the Public Service Pulse Survey. They looked at 7,000 citizens across many developing nations or developed nations in 7 countries, and what they found is a similar gap, right? And that gap looks a little bit like people in the US are either completely dissatisfied or neutral on their experiences with digital experiences with government, right? Yet, despite that, 33% of them want to increase their interaction with government in a digital way. So there's a lot of opportunity for improvement, right? Even small things, and I think if you take nothing else away from this talk, it's even small things can make a big difference when you're that far behind, right? And Ben's going to really go into that in detail. But one of the things, again, kind of what the conclusion was when they surveyed these people and followed up in the U.S., 31% of them attributed their lack of satisfaction with their digital experience to, or said that the awareness of available digital services could be the single most important change government can make to increase their satisfaction. So, like I said earlier, that discovery, that understanding of what else is out there, what it's available, what's the content you have, what's the data you have, what services what can you do for me? That is actually one of the most important things from this survey in terms of citizens saying that would improve their satisfaction.
And so speaking of satisfaction, Forrester, I'm sure many of us have seen this. If you read the space, there's an article or press releases every year. You'll see the customer service index by industry. Government has been kind of lagging there near the bottom for about as long as this has been conducted by Forrester. We can all go to sleep, though, knowing that we're better than ISPs, so we'll take that. But you see the range.
No, because the range goes lower for government.
On average. But again, the range is really wide there because, again, you've got folks like National Park Service, who are at the top. This is by top to bottom in terms of where we stand. So at the highest, we're at 77 USA jobs down there in 45, 44 there over the last couple of years. So what is all this saying? There's a lot of opportunity. Obviously, it's no one wants to be at the bottom of the list. And for some folks, that can be really discouraging. It's like, well, we're already at the bottom. It's going to be really hard to try to make improvements. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and this is what gets me personally excited about this particular use case and charting to create more personalized experiences in government, is that the study from Forrester continues to show that even a single point increase in the CX score in government can have pretty significant returns on things that we care about citizens or our users doing. So from a compliance perspective, you'll see a 2% increase in compliance with what you're trying to have somebody do. I love this forgiveness one. When you've had really good experiences with a brand and they mess up, you'll be more likely to forgive them with just a single point increase. So yes, Amazon might have messed up one order, but they got it right. I'm not holding that against them because they fulfilled all 250 others of the orders that have come to my house in the last year. So again, and that's just a single point. That's going from an average of 57 across the government to 58, right? So just kind of multiply that out as you move your way up. Trust, obviously, hugely important. Advocacy, someone being an advocate saying, hey, have you signed up for PreCheck? It's a great service. They reminded me, 6 months out before it was due, and they gave me a 5% discount on my renewal because I did it, right? That I've turned into an advocate for a great government service, right? And then engagement, right? We all want people to continue to engage with our brands, whether it's government or commercial. Again, a 2.5% increase in engagement with just 1 point jump from a CX scale perspective. So again, that's what's really exciting.
Yeah, and just to jump in, something else I remembered from the study just as you were speaking is that, yes, government has, you would think has been making improvements, but actually what they found in that same survey Forrester did last year is that the government average actually hasn't increased at all. And most of the other industries are actually improving. Well, all the others are improving. And so that's actually another reason, again, why any small thing that can be done can actually have an impact, because right now it's pretty much a stalemate. So let's talk a little bit about potential opportunities. So we didn't honestly spend a lot of time going through every single scenario that could happen in government, because that's your job, right? That's what we want to do, is we want to give you guys enough ideas that you go back out into your spaces and you try to ideate and generate things that could be done with your unique use cases. The number of different scenarios and things that happen on the vast array of government websites is so big that we're just like scratching the surface with a few ideas. So bear with us if they're a little haphazard. But so first thing, something personalization can do, it can show content preferences. Let's say it's a regulatory agency and you really want to drive a line between having to put all this content out there for citizens and having to put very specific nitty-gritty information out there for regulatory purposes, say lawyers and people like that, right? You could surface different things for different people and show them in different ways, giving them a personalized experience based on how they've been using the site and who they are. Geographic reference, right? So this is a snapshot of FEMA.gov, right? If you go there today, it's like, hey, you know, maybe I was affected by an earthquake in California, or maybe I was affected by a hurricane in New Orleans, right? But there's no distinction, right? Whereas actually we can discern in a heartbeat if I'm coming in from Louisiana or I'm coming in from California, and maybe you can serve me more comforting, more empathetic content than just a giant list I have to scroll through of how to find out how to apply for aid or something like that. You could show me that you care. You could show me the forms that I need. You could show me that you know that I've been affected, right? Topical interest. This one's a little out there. I think it spooks some people, but you know, and I think, by the way, that is one of the biggest issues with personalizations. People say, "Hey, that's spooky. I don't want Congress to know, you know, what I'm interested in or whatever." Well, guess what? You're still browsing their website. They know what they know, right? Whether they do anything about it to help you, that's what we're talking about. We're not saying go plant a bunch of cookies that aren't already there, right? So what's interesting about this is there are people who are out there monitoring the vast array of stuff that's going on in Congress. Well, why don't you give me that information that you know is topically interesting or relevant, I'm following, or it's something that's near and dear to my heart, or it's for my job, or I'm advocating for, or whatever. Maybe I want to see that content first instead of going through, you know, whatever happens to be published by the editor of the web page that day. Narrow it down for me. You know, this is a use case that I find really interesting, right? It's like, hey, you know, you know where I'm coming from. Why are you asking me questions, right? Or why are you know, take me to do exactly what I need. So I feel like, you know, in some cases, this is healthcare.gov, right? Think about all the different states. Every single state has different regulations. It has different forms. It has different laws. It has different things that apply to it, right? Well, if that's the case, are you going to make me go through all 50 states to find the stuff that matters to me, or are you going to tell me what's going on in my state, right? Let's say you want a call to action. You want me to go do something. You want me to go buy access to the national parks in advance, right? Like, you're going to make me go through a list of all the national parks to get there, or you're going to help me figure out something based on what you know I'm interested in. So how do you make this feel like, you know, like it's a travel destination, not like it's I'm browsing around. So serve it up. Yeah.
And we're gonna continue with the National Park Service theme through through another kind of use case of finding a park and then buying a pass. And we've done that deliberately by choosing the National Park Service. As you remember recall back to the list that we have, they're at the top of the list when it comes to CX in this space. And we thought it'd be a good idea to kind of start there and even show you that while they're at the top of the list, there's still room to introduce personalized experiences along this journey that could improve it along the way. So, and really, there's not a single place in government, whether you're doing it the best or the worst or anywhere in between, that this doesn't work. And it's not to say, here as we get into this, because I know we all live and breathe this every day, is that there's not challenges that are barriers to doing this in this space that that exist elsewhere. There are absolutely things that make it more difficult in the government context than elsewhere. Some of those being, again, privacy and legal concerns, things like GDPR, the CCPA in California, the Consumer Protection Act, HIPAA, you're dealing with PII, again, having personal, you can't make anything personal without knowing a little bit about who you're talking to, right? And those are absolutely things that you have to address and that can be addressed, and I encourage you not to be deterred by that. Organizational complexity, right? We're all working inside of large bureaucratic organizations with probably a group or two or three that are have a say or a piece of this personalization puzzle that we're trying to work with.
Except for you, right?
Yeah, no, I don't. Okay. Yeah, not at all.
I was starting to take offense.
Yeah, and then cookies, as Jeff mentioned, there's different levels. Again, the way that we track users through the internet is through cookies, and there's different tiers of level of regulation and compliance that are required. Tier 1 being the single session cookies that pretty much every government website has just to be able to do analytics. And then moving into the second and a third tier of where you can have tracking cookies to be able to understand what users are returning, both with and without PII. And again, with each kind of step down or up the ladder here from a tier perspective, it just requires more coordination and approvals from entities inside your organization and outside. All this being said is that there are barriers and there are ways to do personalization even with these barriers in place.
And I just want to emphasize too that these barriers are not unique to government, right? GDPR, PII, COPA, HIPAA. I mean, these things apply to all of our clients in other industries. I mean, we're doing this in healthcare, financial services. So yes, there are barriers, but you have to be savvy to overcome those barriers. And in the commercial space, people are using those barriers as potentially competitive advantage, right? So if I'm a hospital system and I'm willing to push the barriers a little bit further than the competition, maybe I'm more likely to get patients because I've created a more empathetic, more personalized, tailored experience, right? I'm not going to violate the law, but I'm going to push it a little further technologically. So that's a thing. And then the other thing I wanted to say about the cookies, because Ben and I talked a lot about this, is we understand that each of you is going to have unique challenges, and obviously some agencies, some departments are going to be in a better situation as a result of how their OIG or the IT has ruled on these things. So the more flexibility you have, if you're doing tier 3 cookies, then you've got more flexibility and more tools at your disposal. If you've got tier 1 restrictions, then you're going to have to be more creative or less ambitious. So let's kind of talk a little bit about what's involved in a personalization effort. I think at this point we've clearly established it can be a big thing, but we also again want to leave you with the idea that you can start small, you can experiment, you can pilot, and so one of the things I think is really interesting is that this blends really well to this concept of sort of going lean, doing agile, and that's starting to take hold in government as well. And I think that same thing applies. However, we still have ye old system-y thinking, right? So if you actually want to do personalization at scale in a big way, you have to think of it not as a set of technologies, but actually as a complex system that requires the technologies, it requires processes to be coordinated, it requires data and having data governance policies, and then it also requires that people component, right? The buy-in and those things. So when you do it really big, really writ large, it cuts across all these areas and it really starts to feel to that individual like it's a systematic kind of thing. Particularly when you go multi-channel like Ben showed, it's going to be more and more important that there's a large system underlying those experiences and they're not disparate. But when you break it down, what lives on top of that, and this diagram is a little crazy, it looks cool, maybe it's hard to understand, but that system, what lives on top of that, once you have that foundation, is think of it as a series of anywhere from dozens to maybe hundreds or thousands of individual interaction experiences that you're creating. Each one is uniquely tailored to a set of audiences, with a different process, different content, different calls to action, maybe different tools in place. And so what you really have is you have a system, a platform, a foundation that you've built that works within your organization, and then you're just adding and layering individual experiences to optimize how that personalization feels until you pretty much have it to where your individual starts to feel like, hey, this place isn't all about sending one message, it's about interacting with me and having that relationship that we talked about. Not every one of those has to be tightly segmented either, right? You can still have broad-based group messages in conjunction with highly tailored personalized experiences, and it's seamless to the individual. They don't know. The technology decides the experience that you have. So you're designing and sort of orchestrating these things, but the individual is unaware. They're just having this experience that feels better to them.
And so to do this, we've created a personalization canvas. It's something that we've been working on and we've started to use with our clients that we thought would be really helpful here. And so what I'm going to walk through here is some of the kind of the spirit of the canvas, and then we'll kind of dig right into what the canvas is and the elements of that. I know we're running short on time, so we'll start to move here really quickly through this next section. So the first thing that you have to do when you're considering personalized experiences is you have to start by understanding who the heck you're talking to, right? You can't do something personal without knowing who that person is. So when you start there, you have to consider different things. Who's your audience? What are their demographics? What are their wants and needs? You have to, again, know who you're trying to personalize to before you can personalize anything. Next to that, we've kind of hinted on this along the way, is that once you know who, now you need to start thinking about what you have to say to them. What's the content that you have that they would care about? And then start to do that analysis of what content are you missing? How are you going to have to craft and tailor a message to an individual? And do you have that content available? And if not, what's the process then for creating that? Next, as Jeff alluded to in the previous slide, data. In order to do this and have this be, again, delivered, personalized experience delivered by technology, you have to have data to understand about how an individual is interacting with you. So you have to be able to collect it, then you have to be able to understand it, and then you have to have the right people to be able to manipulate and understand how to react to that data once it's normalized. What do you want them to do? Call to actions, right? You have to think about what are the most important use cases for your audiences and their interactions with you, and what are those top ones to where we could start to think about personalization, and how are you going to get them to respond? And then finally, you have to be able to measure. You have to have ability to understand where you are today and where you'd like to go with personalization, and measure and understand, has this actually improved the outcomes? And you have to have this really, you have to have a solid baseline in place before moving forward. So again, having the right data, the right call to actions, and really understanding what metrics that you need or want to be able to track going forward so you can iterate, evolve, and get better over time is hugely important. So here's the canvas. Ta-da! It's big and broad, and Jeff will talk about this here in a second, is that it's also very low tech. While we're talking about something that is highly technical when you do it, when we use the canvas, we will put this up on a board and we'll start, whiteboarding or putting sticky notes up against it. And so let's walk through this real quickly with these three broad buckets. So,
do you want to go to the one with the stickies in the interest of time?
Yeah, let's go. We'll go to one that's actually, let's just stay here.
Okay.
So first two on the upper left and the orange, it's your strategy and insights, right? This is what do you know, where are you going, and how are you going to get there? And that includes two things: the customer research and insights, which we kind of just talked about with the personas. Who are you targeting? And your customer relationship. The next bucket is around analysis and reporting. It's learning from experiments, iterating on your approach, and you're looking at your ROI and success metrics, and then also data governance. And then finally, it's the bottom bucket are your mechanisms and interactions. It's managing the experience, right? How are you managing your content and communication? What technology and tools do you have today that could potentially support this, and what tools do you need? And then finally, you can't do any of this without thinking about what are the privacy, policy, and compliance issues.
All right,
Shall
so
we?
I don't know how much time we have,
Yeah,
but we thought we'd just run through the National Park Service one real quick. So what we've got is, we just kind of did this on our own just to kind of prove how we do it. You know, you've got an opportunity to find a park. You want to go on a family vacation, you're starting to browse. You've got search, you've got a map. You're now moving through what I would consider to be a very long list of national parks. Listed alphabetically. You're not working on anything that I've chosen that I said I like. I like mountains. I like beaches. I live in the Northwest. I live in the Southeast, right? I like these activities or those activities. All of these things are things that could be personalized. Going through more of the experience. This is kind of the literal user journey that we went through. Again, a publisher, an editor has said, hey, I'm going to randomly decide that of the 167 parks, this is the one that I'm going to feature content on. Well, that's kind of a crapshoot on whether that's the one that I'm interested in, right? If we find something relevant, we might start a journey. That journey starts in a very obscure place. You're not prompted with anything. If I've been there and looking at certain things, it's obvious you might want to push me to buy a pass or book a campground or do something like that, but that's not happening. I have to go navigate myself there, which doesn't help me or you, right? The call to action isn't clear. More reading, more searching. I'm trying to get to the point where I'm executing the call to action. The thing that we both agree that I want to do and you want me to do isn't happening fast. It's taking me through a series of places and then eventually kicking me to another site where I have to start all over about reading about the benefits and going through it all again. And so in the end, I think I do eventually end up at some sort of an action, a shopping cart to buy this, but we should have already been here. We should have already known this. We should have had a relationship where you understood me, I understood what you had to offer, and we got there a lot faster. So we actually filled out the canvas for this, and I don't know how much time we had to talk through it, but we are going to provide the slides. So
yeah, we've got the slides. We won't go through each one, but effectively what we did is that, thinking about the journey that you just saw Jeff go through, we took that lens and applied the questions that you kind of work through with the canvas, right? So we started to identify who is our target persona here in the upper left, working through, again, what's our ability to capture data on the far right, and then working across the bottom. What tools do we have? What are the privacy implications and things that we need to address and things that we know? And when you go through this, you're not going to know. You may have questions, like a question maybe get another question, like I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to go figure it out. But again, it's a way to get you to start thinking about how you approach personalization, because again, while it's largely, while a lot of this is technology driven, a large portion of being able to do personalization has nothing to do with technology at all.
Right. Absolutely. It's low tech. It's about thinking. So hopefully at this point we've given you a lot to think about, maybe too much. We're certainly running over a little bit of time, so I want to make sure we leave you with a few simple recommendations. So if you're struggling with where to get started, this is sort of what we recommend. First, pick a small, manageable pilot. Something that doesn't cut across a lot of silos, a lot of bureaucracies. It's a simple use case. It's discrete. It doesn't carry over. Second, get buy-in. Figure out the people that are going to need to say yes or no to these decisions, and sell them on your idea, right? Get the buy-in. Go low tech, as Ben said, the exercise, the thinking, the talking, all that stuff, that's the important stuff. That's relatively low tech. If you're going to buy technology, Acquia Lift, Acquia has a personalization platform. There's tons of available technology. Start simple, start small. Don't spend your time overcomplicating that piece. Try the canvas, we'll give it to you. You can try it. I think try something like that. Come up with ideas on a whiteboard. Don't turn this into an overthinking exercise. As Ben said, set your objectives and KPIs. Figure out exactly what success criteria looks like. Did you establish that you improve the customer experience through a simple exercise of personalization? And once you've done that, you've got to measure it and you got to iterate. You got to keep doing it, growing it, growing it, grow it, and now you've got a case you can carry forward.
All right, we've reached a point to where we can talk together.
It's kind of interesting to me how personalization can be off one simple data point of where somebody's from state. So I'm with DHA, it's very locked down to so we can track and what kind of use. So let's assume tier 1. Well, maybe let's assume tier 2.
Tier 2.
0 PII. And
Yep.
tracks.
Right.
Maybe I can get that approved. Is there a module out there that I can give you like a simple iteration one where we just do A for East Coast, B for West Coast? Is there anything out there available?
Toby, do you know? Is there a module available to do like basic regional stuff off an HTTP header without using a personalization engine?
I don't know the name of it. There's one that I know that does take advantage of the geolocation API in your browser. You can expose that through JavaScript until it's supposed to front end. I don't know of one that lets you do it through a Drupal module that Drupal's going to be aware.
Okay.
But most of the time for personalization, you're going to want to do that on the client side anyway, so that's probably the right approach.
Yeah.
I guess my short answer would be talk to the guy in the sling.
But to your point, most kind of cabinet level government agencies are operating in a tier 2 cookie environment now. So it's which gives you the ability to track users, anonymous users, and their location and browsing history up to a certain point in time. And I forget if it's monthly or like 6 months. There's some period of time that you can capture that. Which again can also be geolocation based, so you can do some of that, and then it's a matter of this is where it's like you can test and kind of find the right way to do the A/B testing that you're discussing, and you're still fully compliant. It's really where you get into tier 3. There's not that many sites that are operating in a tier 3 environment in the government use case with PII, but there's so much that you can do at the tier 2 level. To where again you're going to see you maybe can't do the most advanced things in the world. But given where we are and making kind of small incremental improvements that we talked about, you'll see hopefully some really, really cool improvements and returns on that.
Two of the most powerful things you can get are probably off of tier 2. One is what am I looking at, ergo what am I interested in, if you can ascertain that, and where am I coming from.
Yep. Any other questions or?
Should probably, in the interest of time, I don't know if we have anyone waiting for the room.
No, we have till 4:15.
Oh, all right,
yeah.
great.
We're
I'm
good.
sorry.
No,
I'm
it's all
moving
good.
faster than we need to move.
Yeah.
All right, great. I'll
Okay.
get another question.
Just a quick question about the technology that your teams use as far as, what do you use an engine like Optimizely? What do you use?
Can we take that? I'm back. Yeah, we've used Optimizely. We've used Acquia Lift. Jeff can speak to me or any others you want to mention.
I don't know.
Those are the.
I would defer to someone on the technical team. Those are the two that I'm aware of. We partner with both and have used both extensively, but there's probably other stuff. I just don't. Personally, I don't know what it is, but again, the guy in the sling knows stuff. By the way, there are like an enormous number of options out there. Just like any MarTech category, you're going to find so much there, which is why I think just focusing on the use cases first and then looking at the technology is important, because the technology itself can just start you down this rabbit hole of like it all being all about the tech and not really having the use case. Because again, if you're going to be limited to a very specific set of use cases, maybe a very simple and inexpensive technology would work, and you don't want to sort of overbuy for the constraints that you have.
Yeah, and to that point, like where we've seen challenges is where if you go tool first, you'll have acquired a tool and then realize there's a ton of kind of think work and the strategy behind before you can really implement and have the tool be as effective as it should be. So we've seen clients who have bought a tool and then they're like, oh, it's not just kind of set it, turn it on. It's like, we've got 6 months worth of work to do to kind of think about how to actually use it and implement. Question here.
How do you make sure that personalization isn't excluding people? Because I know for me, I work for a government agency overseas, and we serve United States citizens that live abroad. And I've noticed since websites are going to this personalization route, there's a lot of websites that don't consider international United States citizens, and then they actually put roadblocks so they can't simple past because they have this personalization system.
Yeah, that's an excellent kind of use case for the reason why you have to continually monitor and understand how personalization is working and looking at the performance of your site and what it's doing for certain sets of users. So in that case, that would be an area where, again, I would want to be looking at those particular use cases and making sure that, again, we're not bucketing people or trying to personalize things for people that don't really fall into that use case and are limiting their ability to do certain things on the site. So again, that's really speaks to the importance of it's never done. Like once you start on this journey, it never ends. And I don't want it to seem like and that's not a bad thing. It's like that's what happens. I think when you can kind of set it and forget it. It's like here it is, and we're going to let it run and not kind of stay on top of it.
Yeah, and I think it's almost, to me, it's almost like the opposite of like security policy, where you sort of you start with like block everything and then allow. In this scenario, it's like you're actually, what you're doing is you're taking the experience that we have now, and like I was trying to show in that really complicated diagram, you're layering on these specific experiences that cater to individuals, and hopefully you're not alienating or excluding anybody in the process. But you might not be getting one of those tailored experiences, but you're at least getting what was there. You're not, nothing's sort of locking you out. That's how personalization should work if it's layered appropriately.
And even to that use case where like you may realize like geolocation-based personalization based on our core audiences, while in some cases may be great, we can't kind of implement that across the board because to the point that you made of like we may exclude people who need to interact with us, and again, geo-based personalization may just not be the best way to go about it. I saw another. Yeah.
Way back here, so
it's okay.
I'm getting into the weeds a little bit with like a product like Aqua Live. And done successful implementations where it's like an MVP because it feels like you want to start small, like a very small scale.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the challenges I see is getting the data, the user data, the content, the user information organized to build a real personalized experience. And I feel like a lot of organizations aren't there. They want to dip their toes in a little bit with maybe even a very small subset of massage data.
Yeah.
And putting it into a product like Aqua Live, which feels very presented as a very enterprise level product. And I'm wondering if you done small scale personalization has been successful and have successfully grown incrementally as an organization gets the back end technology.
Yeah, I honestly, I would say we're still even with commercial clients, we're still at the very beginning stages of seeing them implement. Yes, small use cases. What we're honestly not doing is that full diagram of the really big enterprise, everybody's personalized. We're not seeing that much in the commercial marketplace yet. But yes, our hope is to scale clients up to that point where it is like that. So we've got a long way to go. But specific to Aqua Lift, so it's actually interesting that you mention it, because one thing that we didn't understand when we first started using it is that the recommended approach for it is actually to set it and forget it initially. So you actually turn on Lift and you sit there and you let it collect like 6 months worth of data before you actually try to personalize some of those journeys. That's what they recommend. And in the meantime, you're doing some of this work, right? So that's the approach. Again, I mean, I can't emphasize enough, like a simple use case, some very clear audiences. That's the other thing, is just defining those audiences. The other thing they recommend. I mean, I think the Aqua uses the expression walk, crawl, run, or crawl, walk, run. Shouldn't it be? Yeah, yes. Crawl, walk, run. And
get beaten down.
Right. You take a step backwards. So that is their philosophy. And again, it's like set it, let it collect data for like 6 months, and now we've got enough data to start doing something with the algorithm. So.
Yeah, almost everybody starts really small. Whether it's like understanding the typical use like path that someone may take. Think about in like a healthcare setting or somebody coming for medical information. Like they always go to this particular site and they look up something about how this particular treatment. It's like let's surface that,
right. And that's,
so they don't have to go through the.
That is his experience, right? Jake, to give you a very like super specific thing is like. That is Jake, right? I haven't done on my glasses. I think it's you. So we are doing with someone like you guys something like that, where it's like, let's say we want to get a donation experience out of it, right? So if I'm looking at like a lot of content that is really clearly like deep caregiver type stuff around a specific thing, maybe I'm very interested, this is a foundation scenario, but maybe I'm very interested in making a donation because I'm clearly someone who's been affected by the disease or whatever, you know what I mean? So like that could be a very clear, measurable CTA for a simple personalization use case.
I think we have time for maybe one more question. Yeah, right here.
What role do you see for gamification as part of personalization efforts? Collecting badges?
I haven't really thought about that. I think it's a really interesting use case. It's also, I think, a great way, just thinking off the cuff about, again, we need data from the individual to be able to personalize. And that, I think, is a really interesting use case for drawing information about what people really care about. Again, if you're coming back, you're providing something to me based on, you know, a series of surveys, or again, if you return 2 weeks and you help me understand, go back to like the National Park Service example, maybe when you come back to the site, hey, like, what are your top 5 favorite activities? Do that, get a badge. And I think you could certainly play into it, but I had not really thought about that in that context.
Merit badge, like a camping merit badge or something?
Yeah.
Cool. That's super interesting. I never thought about it either. Great. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you all for your great questions. Ben and I are obviously we're going to share the slides, and we're happy to answer whatever questions people have.
Yeah,
later on.
We're set up right outside here at the Phase 2 booth. So if you want to come pick our brains, happy to. Thank you for spending the morning with us.